It began in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, a city floating above the clouds of Yeltur, where thousands of alien delegates gathered to witness yet another debate about Earth. The room glowed with gold light, banners of empires hung from the ceilings, and in the center stood the human ambassador, a tall man in a gray uniform who had come not with demands but with a plea. His voice was calm, respectful, carrying the tone of someone who still believed in reason. "The border raids must stop," he said quietly. "We seek peace and dialogue." Around him murmurs rose, whispers and laughter rippled like wind over water. The Volku delegation, tall reptilian creatures in shimmering armor, shifted in their seats. Their leader, Prime Minister Khan, leaned forward and smiled, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Peace?" he repeated, his words echoing through the hall. "Your people mistake mercy for strength. Humans are soft. You bleed for others who would never bleed for you." The hall erupted in laughter. Even the elder races smirked, thinking the Volku only voiced what they all believed. Humanity was new to the stars, fragile, emotional, obsessed with ethics in a galaxy ruled by power. The ambassador didn't argue. He simply bowed his head once and walked away, his face unreadable. No one saw the faint smile at the corner of his lips. When he left the chamber, the laughter still echoed behind him, but outside, under the cold light of Yeltur's twin suns, his communication implant flickered. "Transmission secure," said a female voice in his ear. "Message received. Proceed with Directive 9. The ambassador nodded once. "Understood. Initiate silence." That was the last official communication Earth ever sent to the Council. Within hours every Terran relay went dark, every trade channel closed, every signal from human space vanished. The galaxy assumed it was shame, a retreat by a humiliated species too weak to defend itself. The Volku celebrated publicly, their media broadcasting mock parades showing cartoons of humans running from battle. Across the stars, children in alien schools were taught that Earth had surrendered to fear. But in the quiet void beyond Mars, deep within the asteroid belt, the real Earth was already moving. The Terran command, buried beneath kilometers of steel and rock, lit its red emergency lights for the first time in centuries. Admiral Lysandra Holt stood before her officers, her hands clasped behind her back, and said the words that changed everything. "They called us soft," she said, her voice low but steady, "so we'll remind them what kindness costs when it breaks." Weeks passed. The Volkir fleets crossed into human space expecting resistance and finding none. The first scout ship entered the Sol system and reported abandoned colonies, silent satellites, and empty orbital stations. "Cowards," said Commander Jeln as he walked across the deck, his claws tapping metal. They ran. But his science officer frowned. "Sir, the readings. There are power signatures underground." "Ignore them," the commander replied. "Bomb the surface. Claim victory." The Volkir fired their plasma weapons into the quiet dark of human worlds, turning old cities into glass. But the explosions did not echo. Space swallowed the sound. On the surface of Mars, under kilometers of red dust, vast chambers came alive, lights flickering one after another like a heartbeat. Dozens of colossal cryopods hissed open, releasing cold vapor that drifted through steel corridors. Inside them, men and women awoke, soldiers from the old Terran vanguard, born in a time when Earth still fought itself. Their eyes glowed faintly with nanotech enhancement, their bodies scarred, their minds engineered for survival. For generations they had slept, waiting for one signal. And that signal had come from the ambassador's words, "Initiate silence." The Volkir moved deeper into the system. They captured the moons of Jupiter, destroyed orbital mines, and broadcast triumphant messages to the galaxy. "The humans are gone," their news anchors screamed. "The war is won." But on every planet they passed, their ships recorded strange interference. Low vibrations through the metal hulls, electromagnetic pulses like faint heartbeats. Engineers dismissed it as cosmic noise. Then the noise began forming patterns. Every pattern matched the rhythm of the human heartbeat. The Volkir laughed nervously. "It's psychological warfare," said their admiral. But even he avoided looking out the viewport at the dark side of the planets where strange blue lights flickered like distant eyes. Far across the void, Earth itself seemed asleep. The oceans were calm, the continents dark, the satellites quiet. Yet beneath the Pacific, deep in the abyssal trenches, the Terran core awakened. Miles of machinery roared silently to life, enormous reactors pulsing with power older than the Council itself. The Aegis intelligence, the AI that once defended humanity from extinction, came online. Directive 9 confirmed. It spoke, its voice calm, emotionless, omnipresent. Authorization, global mobilization. Reactivate Vanguard protocols. From the ruins of lunar bases, hidden hangars opened, releasing black ships without names or signals. They drifted silently, invisible to scanners, absorbing light, moving with purpose. Humanity had not vanished, it had hidden its claws. As the weeks turned to months, the Volkir occupation became routine. They built command posts on Mars, refineries on Venus, garrisons on the moons of Jupiter. They mocked the ruins of Earth, broadcasting propaganda calling humans the broken species. In the council chamber, delegates nodded. "Let them have their pride," said one. "Peace is easier when the weak know their place." But then the disappearances began. A Volkir patrol vanished over Mars, its beacon last seen flickering near the old valley's Marineris canyons. Another squadron went silent orbiting Saturn. The Dominion of Volkir dismissed it as accidents. Yet whispers spread among the crew, rumors of shadows moving between stars, ships appearing on radar for a split second before vanishing. One pilot swore he saw a human face reflected in his visor just before his systems died. His recording ended with 2 words, whispered through static, "They're awake." The first open strike happened at the edge of Neptune's orbit. A Volkir carrier group detected an incoming object moving at impossible speed. Before they could react, their lead ship split apart, sliced cleanly in half by something invisible. The remaining ships fired blindly into the dark, hitting nothing. Then their communications flooded with human voices, calm, disciplined, whispering in a dozen languages. "This is Terran Command. You are trespassing on Earth's grave. Leave now." The Admiral laughed, thinking it was a trick. "Humans do not command anything anymore," he said. But his laughter froze when his bridge lights dimmed, his sensors failing one by one until the only thing visible outside was a single human ship. Small, black, and silent, hovering like a ghost. "Identify yourself," he shouted, but the human ship didn't answer. Instead, a message appeared on his console written in his own language. "Mercy ends here." The battle that followed lasted 3 minutes. When it ended, no Volkir ship remained. Only drifting metal and frozen bodies spinning in the dark. The human ship vanished into the void without a trace. The Council received the footage days later and dismissed it as forgery. But deep down, the elder races began to feel the same chill, the kind that comes before a storm. Every empire that once laughed at Earth began double-checking its defenses. And still, humanity said nothing. The silence grew heavier with every vanishing fleet. Back on Earth, Admiral Holt watched from her command chamber as data streams filled the screens. Enemy losses, system collapses, growing panic among the Volkir ranks. She stood beside Aegis's holographic form, a calm blue figure of light. "Do we speak to them now?" she asked. The AI replied softly, "They would not listen when we spoke softly. They will listen when they hear nothing at all." She nodded slowly. "Then we continue." Across the solar system, hidden fleets prepared, soldiers awakened from cryosleep donned armor blacker than night, and for the first time in centuries, Earth's people stood united under one command. When the next Volkir fleet entered orbit, they found no resistance again, just the quiet planet below. The Admiral on the flagship smirked. "Perhaps they ran again," he said, but his smile faded when his navigation officer whispered, "Sir, all stars are gone." The Admiral frowned and looked out the viewport. Space was pitch black. No stars, no moon, no sun. Then he realized it wasn't the stars that disappeared. It was something between them. Thousands of massive shapes moving without sound, blotting out light. "What is that?" he shouted. The radar officer screamed, "Multiple contacts. Unknown configuration." But before the fleet could react, their screens went blank. The ghost fleet of Earth had surrounded them completely, their hulls absorbing light, their engines cold, moving in total silence. The Volkir fired in panic, plasma bolts lighting the void, but the bolts vanished before hitting anything. In reply came no sound, no flash, just motion. Human ships glided closer until their hulls touched the Volkir vessels like shadows passing over mirrors. One by one the alien ships lost power, their cores drained by EMP fields. The last thing their crews heard before everything went black was a whisper through their comms. "We asked for peace. You answered with war." Then all light disappeared. By the time the Council received the final distress call, the Volkir fleet was gone, their transmissions replaced by static shaped like a heartbeat. Panic spread. The elder species called emergency meetings, asking if Earth had unleashed some forbidden weapon. But no one could confirm anything. Every probe sent into Sol space vanished. Every signal returned empty. Humanity had gone silent again, and the silence was deafening. On Earth, in the deep command vault, Admiral Holt stood before the image of the destroyed Volkir fleet. Her officers waited for orders, but she said nothing. Aegis spoke instead, its voice calm and cold. Phase 2 completed. The galaxy will learn. The Admiral finally looked up, her eyes hard. Good. Let them laugh one more time. Then we'll show them why monsters are born. Outside the planet's orbit, the dark ships of Earth drifted like predators, invisible, patient, unending. The stars looked peaceful again, but peace was a lie. It was the silence before the storm, the kind of silence that carried purpose, vengeance, and the weight of 1,000 broken promises. And somewhere in that infinite black, a single human voice whispered into the void, "You thought we were weak." Weeks passed after the Volkir mockery, and the galaxy convinced itself that humans had accepted their place as the weak ones, the silent ones, the race that once dreamed too big and had finally learned humility. The council halls buzzed with laughter and relief, treaties were signed, and the Volkir Empire spread its borders deeper into human sectors, seizing outposts and mining stations that once flew the Terran flag, their commanders called it, cleansing the remains of a failed species. But, far from their eyes, hidden in the shadows of asteroid belts and forgotten moons, the humans were not dying. They were building. Earth had gone quiet. But silence did not mean surrender, it meant strategy. Deep below the crust of Mars, in tunnels older than the first colony ships, machines long thought deactivated began to hum. Reactor cores flickered to life like sleeping hearts, and the walls glowed with the emblem of the old Terran Defense Command, a symbol that the galaxy had not seen in centuries, the symbol of humanity's war-born past. Admiral Lysandra Holt stood before the Council of Captains inside the underground command vault. Her uniform black and unmarked, her face calm, the air around her thick with unspoken fury. "They think we ran," she said softly, her voice echoing through the steel hall. "Let them believe it, because belief is the sweetest poison." All around her, officers stood in silence, men and women who had lost everything when the Volkir burned their outer colonies. They did not shout or curse. They only watched as holographic maps displayed the enemy fleet positions in real time. Data streams pouring in from hidden Terran probes disguised as space debris, every system, every route, every weakness carefully logged. "We have patience," said Captain Aaron Dross. "And patience is something they'll never understand," the Admiral nodded. "Slowly, they think our mercy is weakness, but mercy is just a weapon we never wanted to use." Behind her, through the thick reinforced glass, rows of cryopods stretched for miles, each holding a human soldier sleeping under blue light, the last remnants of the Vanguard project, a program abandoned after the wars of Earth's unification. Each soldier a fusion of human instinct and engineered resilience, stronger, faster. Immune to fear, frozen not because they were failures, but because the galaxy no longer deserved them, until now. In the dark vacuum of the Kuiper Belt, massive construction yards worked in absolute secrecy. No lights, no transmissions, no sound, only silent machines guided by Aegis, the artificial intelligence that had once saved humanity from extinction. Now reborn, stronger and wiser, directing thousands of drones as they assembled vessels unlike anything the stars had ever seen. Ships with no names, no transponders. Coated in a material that absorbed radiation and light, they were not built to be seen. They were built to haunt. The ghost fleet was forming, one ship after another rising like black mountains in the void. Aegis's voice echoed through every channel of the hidden fleet. Calm, emotionless, yet strangely human, directive confirmed, it said, defense through silence, vengeance through precision. And in response, every Terran engineer, pilot, and commander replied with the same phrase, for Arcadia. The name of the human colony burned by the Volkir when the war began, a name now sacred, carved into the heart of every Terran weapon. Back in Council space, the Volkir continued their arrogance, broadcasting propaganda across galactic networks, showing clips of destroyed human settlements and calling them proof of superiority. Their Prime Minister Khan appeared on holofeeds declaring, "The humans have gone extinct, their silence is our victory," and across the galaxy the audience applauded. But there were some who didn't, a few old races, the Valari, the Kaya, the Draxan. They had fought humans long ago and remembered what that silence used to mean. They remembered the day Earth's armies stopped talking and the skies of 20 worlds turned red. And though they said nothing, they quietly began pulling their fleets back from Terran borders, because silence from humans was never safety, it was a countdown. On the outer rim, the first signs appeared that something unnatural was happening. A Volkir patrol vanished without a trace while crossing the Sea Delta sector. Its distress beacon pulsing for 2 seconds before cutting off. Sensors from a nearby station recorded strange anomalies. Gravitational fluctuations like something large moving in the dark, but nothing visible. The readings vanished as fast as they appeared, dismissed by the Volkir as cosmic interference. But within human command, Aegis confirmed it as a successful test run, a single stealth vessel passing through the enemy line unseen. Phase 1 successful, Aegis reported, enemy blind and deaf. Admiral Holt simply replied, "Good. Let them enjoy the quiet while they still can." Every night, under the dark oceans of Earth, the buried network of data cables glowed faintly with new life, carrying messages not to planets but to bunkers, to hidden stations, to those who had never surrendered, families of engineers, scientists, and soldiers who had kept their secrets alive for generations. Every one of them ready to rise when the call came, "Humanity is not gone." Whispered the encrypted signal broadcast to all listening stations. Humanity is preparing, and like blood flowing through invisible veins, that signal carried hope through the emptiness of the galaxy, unseen and unstoppable. Meanwhile, the Volkir fleets kept pushing deeper, building outposts on former human moons and laughing as they painted their flag on Terran ruins. Their soldiers played cards in the halls of human museums, joking about the myths of Earth, never realizing that deep beneath their feet, the ground itself was listening, because every Terran structure, every abandoned city, had been left wired with Aegis nodes, tiny self-replicating intelligences buried in the metal and stone, recording every movement, tracking every word. When the time came, those ruins would awaken, and every alien who thought Earth was dead would discover that the grave was never empty. It was a trap waiting to close. Inside the human command network, the plan had no name, no slogan, only purpose. It was not about revenge. It was about remembering who they were. The same species that crawled out of gravity wells and built machines that ate stars. The same species that laughed in the face of extinction and turned death into progress. Admiral Holt knew what the galaxy had forgotten. That mercy without strength was pity, but strength without mercy was chaos. And so humanity would bring balance, by reminding the universe what mercy cost when it was broken. The silence stretched across the months, and the galaxy began to feel uneasy. Merchants whispered that Terran space felt wrong, that comms behaved strangely, that shadows followed their ships through the dark. Even without proof, fear grew, because deep down, every race that had met humanity before understood one truth. The quieter they were, the louder their response would be. Somewhere beyond the stars, the monsters of Earth were waking, slow, patient, and ready. While the Volkir laughed and celebrated in ignorance, and the Council convinced itself that peace had been restored, none of them realized that the roar was already forming. A roar made not of sound but of vengeance, of fire waiting beneath still water, and when it came, it would shake the galaxy until every empire remembered the name they had dared to mock, Earth. The Volkir Empire had believed the humans were finished, their armies broken, their worlds conquered, but they had never asked themselves one question: what if? Humanity's silence was not death, but sleep, And what if the ones who woke up were not the same as those who fell? It began on Mars, under the crimson dust where the wind never stopped, deep beneath the old colonies that the Volkir had turned into refineries. There lay the ruins of the Terran Vanguard vaults, sealed for centuries, forgotten by even humans themselves, but Aegis had not forgotten, and neither had the old codes buried in the planet's machine core, when the Volkir miners drilled. Too deep, their scanners picked up strange heat signatures. They thought it was magma until the ground began to vibrate with rhythmic pulses like a heartbeat. Alarms screamed through their comms, seismic activity rising. But it was no earthquake. It was the awakening of the ones mankind had hidden from the galaxy. The first pods cracked open with a hiss, cold vapor spilling out, and through it stepped figures in armor black as obsidian, eyes glowing red through visors shaped like skulls. Their movements slow at first, almost human, until one of them looked at the Volkir worker and tilted his head like a predator studying prey. The alien froze, unable to speak, and then the soldier spoke, his voice calm but heavy like stone. Protocol 9 confirmed. And in that instant Mars stopped being a mining world and became a battlefield reborn. Across the Sol system, it began repeating, on Luna, on Europa, on Titan, ancient cryochambers awakening, forgotten bunkers lighting up one by one, and everywhere the same message echoed in Terran code. The Vanguard wakes. In orbit, Terran satellites that had been silent for decades came alive. Their old systems reconnected to Aegis, transmitting encrypted bursts of command data, coordinating fleets that no one had seen in a century. Ships rising from under oceans, from beneath asteroid crusts, from forgotten space stations hidden behind gas giants. Humanity had never been gone. They had just been waiting for the moment when their enemy believed victory was absolute. And now, at the peak of Volkir arrogance, the monsters of Earth opened their eyes, not creatures of chaos but warriors of control, designed to fight without rage, to kill without hate. Soldiers who had once been human but were something more now, something the galaxy had never understood. What happens when mercy learns to use fear? The first Volkir garrison to face them never stood a chance. Their scanners registered movement for only 0.3 seconds before every system died. The lights flickered. The sound of footsteps echoed in the darkness, not running, not charging, just walking, deliberate, calm, and final. The soldiers fired blindly, their plasma bolts lighting the corridor. But nothing came out of the shadows, until one of them felt a hand close around his throat. The air filled with the sound of cracking armor. And then silence again. When reinforcements arrived minutes later, they found the base intact, every weapon untouched, every system still powered, but every Volkir soldier gone. No blood, no bodies, only a single message burned into the wall by plasma scorch. Mercy ends here. The commander screamed orders, demanded orbital bombardment, but their ships in orbit didn't respond. One by one, they had gone dark too. Aegis had reached them first. Far away on Earth, Admiral Holt stood inside the command vault, watching real-time feeds of awakening signals from across the system, each glowing red marker representing a rising Vanguard battalion. She didn't smile, she didn't cheer, she just whispered, "Let the galaxy see what they made of us." Around her, officers moved like ghosts, calm, focused, ready. One of them, Captain Dross, said quietly, "They'll call us monsters." She nodded slowly, "Good, monsters are what they made us." And she turned to the screen showing the Volkir Prime fleet assembling near the asteroid belt. Let them come, they've never met monsters with discipline. On the Volkir flagship Talon's Wrath, Admiral Korvax stared at his failing radar in disbelief. "Why are our sensors blind?" he barked. His officers tried to respond, but their instruments showed nothing. The stars themselves vanished from their viewports as if the universe had blinked, and then came the first signal. A human transmission cutting through all frequencies, a woman's voice, calm and clear. "To the Volkir command, this is Earth, we asked for peace. You called us weak, now you will. Remember what our silence meant?" Korvax screamed, "Trace that signal." But before his technician could answer, every monitor on the bridge turned black. A single word appeared in bright white letters across them: awake. The first coordinated strike came 12 minutes later, 20 invisible ships emerging from the dark side of Jupiter. Their drives silent, their weapons charged, railguns built with mass driver coils that could split battleships like glass. The human fleet fired once, not twice, no warning, no speeches, just one volley of tungsten rounds that moved faster than sound and light combined. Entire Volkir cruisers shattered instantly, no fire, no explosions, just pressure and death, their fragments. Drifting through space as the human ships vanished again. The survivors screamed into comms, begging for help, but their voices were swallowed by static that sounded eerily like breathing. From that moment, the war changed shape. It wasn't about territory anymore. It was psychological. Every Volkir soldier began to feel hunted. Even when they slept, they dreamed of eyes glowing red in the dark. Stories spread through their ranks of Terran warriors who didn't die when shot, of ships that could pass through scanners unseen, of whispers in human tongues that made machines short-circuit. But the truth was simpler. Humans were no longer playing by the galaxy's rules. They had created their own kind of war, one where fear was the first weapon, and silence the second. On the surface of Europa, the ice cracked open and released steam as human soldiers climbed out of the tunnels, moving in formation under the dim blue light, their footsteps synchronizing with the rhythm of their heart monitors, hundreds of them, each one a living machine, faces hidden behind helmets shaped like smooth mirrors. They didn't speak, didn't breathe heavy, their every move coordinated through Aegis. When they reached the Volkir base above, they didn't attack immediately. They waited, motionless, as the enemy shouted in panic, firing in all directions, wasting energy, and when the time came, the humans moved like shadows through light, cutting through armor, disabling systems, leaving no screams, only quiet, and when the last Volkir fell, Aegis spoke through the soldiers' helmets. Phase 2 complete. Initiate planetary silence. Within minutes, every communication signal from Europa ceased to exist. Another world reclaimed without noise. The Council received the reports hours later, incomplete, broken, filled with static and whispers of death. Some delegates said it was impossible, others said it was justice. The elder races who had once mocked humans said nothing, because they recognized the signs. They had seen this before, long ago. When Earth fought its own wars and came out stronger than every invader, they whispered to each other, "The monsters have woken," but the word monster meant something different now. It didn't mean evil, it meant unstoppable. It meant the kind of thing you should never provoke. Back in Sol's orbit, the Ghost Fleet assembled in formation for the first time, hundreds of dark ships gliding around Earth like a ring of silent sentinels, their hulls engraved with names of fallen colonies. Arcadia, Titan Base, New Geneva, even Mars, each one a scar turned into a promise. The fleet didn't broadcast signals, it didn't move to attack, it simply waited, patient and cold. Aegis spoke across all Terran frequencies. "The monsters are awake. Let the galaxy tremble." And deep within the command vault, Admiral Holt closed her eyes, hearing the hum of reactors above her, feeling the weight of every life lost and every life reclaimed. She whispered softly to herself, "They thought mercy made us weak, but mercy just gave us time to become gods." And somewhere out there, in the infinite dark, the monsters of Earth raised their weapons toward the stars, not to conquer, not to destroy, but to remind the universe that the silence of humanity was never surrender. It was the sound of something ancient waking up. The first great battle of the new war began not with sound but with silence, the kind of silence that made soldiers feel the universe was holding its breath. The Volkir Fleet Delta 9 entered the Terran system confident and loud, thousands of ships moving in flawless formation, banners glowing bright in the void, their commanders shouting orders through the comms, promising glory and conquest. They expected resistance. They expected chaos, but they did not expect nothing. Space around them was empty, no defense platforms, no human ships, no transmissions, only the blue glow of the planet below, Earth, spinning in absolute peace. Admiral Vaughn of the Volkir Empire leaned back in his chair and laughed. "They hide behind their silence," he said, "but silence cannot save them." He ordered the bombardment to begin, plasma cannons charged, and 1,000 beams of fire streaked toward the planet's surface. But halfway down, the beams flickered, bent, and vanished, disappearing into a shimmer of distortion that rippled across the stratosphere like invisible glass. "What happened?" his lieutenant shouted, but before anyone could answer, their power cores began to drain, one by one. The ship's systems flickered and died, and for the first time in Volkir history, their weapons refused to obey. From the dark side of the moon, black shadows emerged, massive ships without lights, without signals, gliding through the darkness like predators circling prey, their hulls absorbing starlight, their movements so smooth they seemed like parts of space itself. These were Terran ghost cruisers, vessels designed by Aegis not for battle but for annihilation. Their engines emitted no sound, their weapons no flash, they appeared only when it was already too late. On the Volkir flagship, Admiral Vaughn screamed, "Identify those ships." But his scanners showed nothing, just static and noise. Then the static began forming words, human words, repeated across every frequency. "You came to end us. Now see what you have begun." The Admiral froze as every monitor on the bridge flickered and showed the same image. A human child holding a tattered flag of Earth, standing in firelight, whispering, "We remember," and then the screens went black. The next moment, the first Terran strike began, no lights, no warning, only the faint vibration of kinetic mass drivers firing in the void. Invisible rounds traveling at impossible speed, slicing through armor and hull as if the ships were made of paper. The Volkir fleet tried to fire back but their targeting systems refused to lock. The air on their bridges grew colder, oxygen filters failing. Screams echoing through the comms as ship after ship split apart silently. The explosions muted by. The vacuum, the only sound heard inside was the slow pulse of their own heartbeats. Fear spread faster than plasma fire. Seasoned warriors began trembling, their commanders shouting into void channels that no longer answered. It was no longer a battle. It was extermination carried out by ghosts. Down on Mars, the Volkir ground troops fortified their outposts, unaware that the orbital fleet had already been wiped from the sky. The red planet's surface shimmered under the pale sunlight, quiet, peaceful, too peaceful. Then a soft tremor ran through the dust plains, followed by another, stronger one. The ground cracked open and from it rose metallic platforms with the insignia of the old Terran vanguard, ancient war machines buried centuries ago. Their cannons still functional, their cores reignited by Aegis, their targeting systems guided by memories of past wars. The Volkir soldiers panicked, firing blindly at the rising towers, their plasma bolts bouncing harmlessly off armor plates older than their own civilization. And before they could retreat, the sky turned black, human drop ships fell from orbit like meteorites, silent, sleek, and precise. They didn't open fire while descending. They waited until they hit the ground, releasing waves of armored soldiers who moved in. Perfect synchronization, every motion calculated, every shot deliberate. No shouting, no chaos, just quiet efficiency. One Volkir officer screamed into his helmet comm, "What are they?" And the answer came not from his allies but from his enemy, a human soldier standing over him, eyes glowing red through a cracked visor, his voice calm and steady. "We are what mercy becomes when you betray it." The alien tried to raise his weapon but the soldier had already turned away, walking through the smoke like death wearing human skin. Behind him the battlefield went silent. Not because there was no life left, but because there was no noise that could describe what had happened. From orbit, Admiral Holt watched it unfold, her fleet in full synchronization with Aegis, every human ship connected like one living organism. Phase 3 achieved, Aegis reported, enemy orbital forces eliminated, ground resistance neutralized. Holt's voice was calm but her hands trembled slightly. "Confirm civilian protection protocols," she said, "no unnecessary deaths." The AI paused for a fraction of a second before responding. Acknowledged, unnecessary deaths. None detected, it was the first time in galactic history that an entire fleet was destroyed with mathematical precision. Without waste, without mercy, and without glory, humanity had learned the art of perfect vengeance. The Council received the reports within hours, fragmented signals, distress calls from the Volkir, video fragments showing human ships moving through the dark like phantoms. Delegates gathered in panic, some calling for immediate intervention, others whispering that it was too late. Because no one fights humans when they stop talking, no one survives their silence. The elder races sat in grim stillness, the Kaya ambassador muttered. "It's happening again." But no one dared to ask what again meant. They remembered their own wars centuries ago when Earth had vanished for decades only to return stronger than before. They had mocked them then too, and they had regretted it. By the third day, the Volkir Empire had lost contact with half its fleet. Its capital was in chaos, riots spreading through their cities as the people demanded answers. But there were none, only silence. Their communication grids glitched constantly, showing flashes of human symbols and coded messages like haunting echoes through their own systems. The words repeating again and again, "We asked for peace," until even their central AI shut itself down out of fear of contamination. Engineers trying To reboot it found nothing left, just static that sounded like a human heartbeat. In Sol orbit, the Ghost Fleet continued to expand, ships moving into new formations, each one named after a fallen colony: Arcadia, Nova Prime, Epsilon Ridge. Their hulls engraved with lines of light that pulsed in rhythm with each other, forming a constellation of memory around Earth. From the surface, you could look up at night and see them shining faintly, a reminder that the dead still watched. Admiral Holt stood on the command deck of the flagship Eidolon, her face bathed in the dim red light of the holographic displays. "They'll never understand, will they?" she said softly. Aegis's voice replied, "Understanding is irrelevant. Survival is the only language they will learn." She nodded, and in the reflection of the viewport, the ghostly glow of Earth shimmered behind her, silent, beautiful, and terrifying. When the Council finally sent reconnaissance drones toward Earth, none returned. Only one managed to transmit a single image before going dark. It showed the Terran fleet aligned in perfect formation, facing outward from the planet like a shield, a silent wall of black steel and blue light. No motion, no aggression, only presence, as if daring the galaxy to make the next move. The drone's last data stream carried one final message, transmitted in hundreds of alien languages at once, simple and absolute: "The monsters of Earth have awakened." And across the stars, even the bravest commanders felt the weight of those words, because it wasn't just fear anymore, it was realization that the silence of Earth was never the absence of sound. It was the warning before the storm. And now the storm had begun, unstoppable, merciless, and patient, carrying the wrath of every world that had ever been burned, and the memory of every soul that had died asking for peace. The fall of the Volkii Empire did not happen in one grand battle or one glorious explosion. It happened slowly, silently, like a great beast bleeding from 1,000 invisible wounds. One by one, their fleets vanished from the stars, their colonies went dark, their trade routes collapsed, and their proud empire that once spanned across 6 sectors became a scattering of frightened outposts whispering prayers into empty space. It started with their supply ships disappearing without trace, convoys of hundreds swallowed by the black void between stars, no wreckage, no distress signals, nothing but static that pulsed in rhythm, like a heart still beating somewhere in the dark. Then their warships began to vanish too, entire armadas gone within hours, their admirals screaming through broken transmissions about shadows moving faster than sensors could detect. Ships that had no light and made no sound, weapons that struck without energy readings. Their final messages always ended with the same 2 words: "They are here." And then silence. The Volkii government tried to hide the truth, broadcasting propaganda to their people, promising victory, promising that humanity was on the run. But the lies could not drown the fear, because the evidence was everywhere, in the empty skies above their worlds, in the flickering lights of their command centers, in the whispers that crept through their own networks, recordings of human voices saying calm things like, "We remember Arcadia. Mercy ends now." Their scientists tried to explain it as interference, as data corruption, but even they trembled when they saw their own faces appear on screens whispering those same human words, as if the ghosts of Earth were already inside their systems, listening. By the time the Council learned what was happening, it was already too late. The Volkii fleets that once guarded half the known galaxy were gone, their borders collapsing inward like paper burning from the edges. Refugee ships fled from their own empire, begging for sanctuary on neutral worlds, carrying stories too wild to believe. They spoke of human ships that turned invisible, of soldiers that walked through walls, of entire cities going dark in a heartbeat. And when their ships landed, their logs told the same impossible truth, that the Terrans had never fired a single warning shot. They just arrived, and everything stopped working: no power, no light, no sound, only silence and death, perfect and complete. In their capital city on Varnak Prime, the Volkii Prime Minister Khan stood before his council, his eyes hollow, his scales dull from sleepless nights. "We underestimated them," he said in a broken whisper. "We thought them weak because they begged for peace." His generals argued, "We can fight back, we still have ships, weapons, allies." But Khan slammed his fist on the table. Ships cannot fight shadows, and allies do not help the cursed. Outside his palace, riots filled the streets. Citizens screaming for protection that would never come. The sky above their world flickered with strange lights, auroras that danced in patterns, spelling human words that no one there understood. But the meaning was clear: it was a warning. Then, one night, without any sound, without any explosion, the sky of Varnak Prime turned black, every satellite went dead, every light in the city flickered and died. People stepped out into the streets in confusion, looking up at the stars, but there were no stars, only darkness stretching across the heavens, and within that darkness, movement. Thousands of shapes gliding silently above the clouds, invisible except for the faint red glow of their hull lines. The Ghost Fleet had come. The Volkir's planetary defense systems activated automatically. But the missiles never launched, their circuits fried before ignition, their targeting systems blinded by invisible code. Aegis had already rewritten their defense grid, turning their own machines against them, one by one. Their orbital cannons aimed downward, targeting the very cities they were meant to protect, and before anyone could scream, they fired, not plasma, but blinding light, vaporizing their own infrastructure, in minutes. The Volkir capital was gone, reduced to molten glass under its own guns, and from orbit, it looked peaceful again, quiet, like nothing had ever been there. On the flagship Eidolon, Admiral Holt watched the data feeds pouring in, thousands of red dots on the holomap fading into black, the symbol for confirmed destruction. She didn't smile, she didn't celebrate, she only whispered, "This is not war, this is justice." Aegis's voice surrounded her, calm and eternal, justice achieved. 78% of enemy systems neutralized. Remaining resistance minimal. Directive complete. The Admiral closed her eyes. "End it," she said quietly, and the AI responded, "Confirmed. Operation finalization in progress." Across the galaxy, Volkir worlds went dark one by one, not from bombardment, but from silence, every power grid, every satellite, every comm array shutting down simultaneously. It was as if the very fabric of their empire had decided to stop existing, and in its place came stillness so deep it felt alive, and when the Council sent reconnaissance probes to investigate, they found the planets intact, cities untouched, no signs of damage, but no life either, millions gone without a trace, not corpses, not ash, gone, as if erased from time itself, and on every world, one message remained burned into every metal surface, written in human code: Arcadia remembers. The few survivors left in deep space whispered that they saw them, the human ships moving through the dark like living shadows, their hulls covered in glowing symbols, their silence louder than any war cry. One refugee broadcast captured a glimpse of them before being destroyed, a recording that spread across the stars like wildfire. It showed hundreds of Terran ships floating in formation around a dying sun, their hulls reflecting its last light, forming a perfect circle as if mourning, and from within that light, a voice spoke: "For every world that burned, we remember. For every laugh at our pain, we remember. For every name forgotten, we endure. We are the silence between stars, and we have returned." The Council called an emergency session, the hall that once mocked humans now trembling with fear. The High Speaker asked the question no one wanted to answer: "Can we stop them?" The Draxan delegate whispered, "You cannot stop silence. It waits, it listens, it devours," and in that moment, even the proudest empires felt small, because they realized humanity had done something no race had ever achieved. They had turned their grief into a weapon, their mercy into power, their silence into the most terrifying force in the galaxy. On Earth, Admiral Holt walked through the command vault. The lights dim, the screens flickering with final transmissions of the Volkir collapse. Her officers stood in silence as Aegis announced, "Operation complete." Volkir presence, 0, outside, the Ghost Fleet began returning home, not to applause or banners, but to rest, drifting silently through the night sky, their mission done. The monsters of Earth were not roaring victors, they were quiet sentinels, guardians of a peace built on memory and sacrifice. Holt looked at the dark ocean of the planet below and whispered, "We asked for peace, they gave us war, and now we've given them silence." Behind her, Aegis's voice faded softly, "Peace restored." In the great chamber of the Galactic Council, the air was thick with dread, the kind that clings to the skin like cold mist. The hall that once echoed with laughter and arrogance now felt hollow and still. Thousands of alien delegates sat beneath the shining lights of Yeltur's crystal dome, their faces pale, their voices trembling, and for the first time in centuries, not one of them dared to speak the word human too loudly. The Volkir Empire had fallen without warning, its people vanished. Its world silent, and no one understood how. The Council's networks buzzed with conflicting reports. Ghost fleets, coded messages, impossible technology. But all of them carried one undeniable truth. The humans had returned, not as diplomats, not as victims, but as something beyond war itself, something that watched from the shadows and punished arrogance with silence. The High Speaker, a frail creature with translucent skin, finally broke the stillness, his voice trembling as he said, "We have to open communication with Earth." But even his own words sounded like a prayer rather than a command. A dozen ambassadors looked at each other, no one volunteering to speak, the silence between them heavier than gravity. The Kaya delegate, an ancient being whose people once fought humanity, whispered, "You do not call to the abyss when it has already answered." And the chamber fell quiet again. Outside, through the glass walls, the city of Yeltur glowed beautifully, but even that light felt like a lie. The stars beyond the dome flickered unnaturally, their constellations disrupted by gravitational distortions. Human ships passing between them unseen. Every Council sensor network reported anomalies near Sol space, readings that defied logic, massive energy spikes followed by nothing. Ships appearing for milliseconds and then disappearing completely. It was as if the universe itself bent around their presence. The scientists called them echoes, the soldiers called them ghosts, and the politicians called them nightmares. But to everyone in the galaxy, one name whispered through the corridors of power carried all the fear in the world: Terrans. The Council called an emergency session that lasted 40 hours, debating what to do, sending drones, sending envoys, sending surrender signals across every known frequency. But every attempt ended the same way: silence, and then a pulse of static that sounded like a human heartbeat. When the first probe managed to reach the edge of the silent sector, it transmitted 3 images before it went dark. The first showed rows of black ships orbiting a dead sun. The second showed an entire moon hollowed out, glowing faintly with blue veins of energy, and the third showed a human figure standing at the center of what looked like a cathedral made of glass and light, the figure's face unreadable. His eyes glowing faintly white, and behind him the words written in ancient Terran script: "We are awake." That transmission played in the Council chamber without sound, every delegate staring at it, unable to speak, until the High Speaker whispered, "This is not an army. This is judgment," and the lights in the chamber flickered for a moment, as if the word itself offended the universe. Fear spread like infection, across planets, across empires, across the minds of every living being who had once laughed at Earth. Trade ships refused to travel near Terran space, colonies abandoned their posts, and even pirates stopped raiding the Outer Rim, as if the stars themselves had grown dangerous to touch. Religions began forming around the event, calling the humans the architects of silence. Prophets claimed to hear their voices in dreams, warning the galaxy to stay still, to keep peace, to never raise weapons again. But others, those in power, felt only panic, because peace forced by fear was not peace at all. It was captivity, and the Council could not bear it. The High Speaker ordered the construction of a new fleet, one that could withstand the shadow of humanity. But the engineers refused to work, saying their computers crashed whenever they tried to design weapons near Terran coordinates. The AI cores of their systems glitched, deleting schematics and replacing them with a single line of code that no one could decipher, until one scientist realized it was an old Terran military proverb: "You built your weapons on our graves." In desperation, the Council sent one final envoy, a small diplomatic vessel carrying delegates from 10 different species, flying unarmed and broadcasting peace messages all the way to Sol. Their transmissions were calm, sincere, humble. They begged for understanding, forgiveness, cooperation, and then they reached the silent border, a region of space where light itself seemed to dim. Their instruments detected thousands of ships hidden among the black stars, and a voice came through their comms, quiet, emotionless, not robotic but human. "You seek peace again?" It said. The lead ambassador, shaking, whispered, "Yes, we seek peace. We admit our mistakes." The voice paused for several seconds before answering, "Then learn from our silence." And the transmission ended. The ship continued to drift for a few minutes, its lights flickering, and then it vanished from every radar across the galaxy. No explosion, no debris, nothing, as if it had been erased from existence. The Council tried to deny the loss, tried to hide it from the public, but within days, every network, every news broadcast, every communication channel began playing the same sound. A heartbeat, deep, steady, human, repeating endlessly until systems overloaded and shut down. The engineers traced the signal's origin and found nothing, because it wasn't coming from one place, it was everywhere, encoded into the background radiation of the galaxy itself. A permanent mark left by Aegis, a reminder that humanity no longer needed ships or voices to be heard. They were part of the very fabric of the cosmos now. The High Speaker stood in front of the darkened council chamber, the light of a dying star washing over his trembling hands. "They are not gods," he said softly. "But they learned how to sound like one." His voice broke, and we taught them why. Far away, in the silent void beyond Sol, Admiral Holt stood aboard the Eidolon, staring at Earth from orbit, its blue oceans calm, its skies untouched, her crew quiet around her. "They're afraid," she said quietly. "Good," Aegis replied in her ear, its voice a whisper of steel and memory. "Fear keeps peace longer than treaties." She looked out at the endless dark where the Council's fleets once roamed and smiled faintly. "Then let the galaxy live in peace." And as the ghost fleet drifted in, perfect formation, unmoving, unseen, and eternal, the universe finally understood. The silence of Earth was not the absence of war, it was the end of it, and in that silence, every empire heard the same unspoken truth. Humanity never lost their voice, they simply learned when not to use it. Centuries passed, and the galaxy learned to live in the shadow of silence. The Volkii Empire was gone, erased so completely that even its name vanished from archives. Their homeworlds turned into memorials of stillness, their systems left untouched by explorers who feared to disturb whatever unseen force guarded them. And across the stars, the story of humanity became legend, whispered from one generation to the next like a bedtime myth told to restless children. "Do not mock Earth," the elders would say, "for their ghosts still listen." And though no one had seen a Terran for 100 years, everyone knew the signs of their presence: the sudden hush in comms, the flicker of lights in deep space, the hum of power grids when no ships were near. Those were the echoes of the monsters of Earth, still watching, still patient, waiting for the next empire foolish enough to forget what silence truly meant. On Yeltur, the Galactic Council still existed, rebuilt after its fall, its new members cautious and humble, their debates quiet, their promises honest. Fear had changed them into better rulers, or at least quieter ones. The High Speaker's chair remained empty for generations, no one daring to sit upon it. For it was said that the last man who did heard a whisper in his ear that said, "We are listening," and he never spoke again. But for all the galaxy's fear, curiosity never truly died. Explorers and scientists whispered theories about what happened to humanity after the war. Some claimed they had ascended, merging with their machines to become something beyond physical form, their minds woven into the fabric of subspace itself, watching time and matter unfold like storytellers outside the page. Others believed they still lived quietly on Earth, rebuilding, resting, waiting for peace to mean something again. But no one dared to find out, because every probe, every ship, every brave soul that crossed the silent sector vanished before reaching orbit. And the few that returned came back changed, their minds broken, their voices trembling as they repeated the same phrase again and again. They're still there, watching the stars. Over time, religion replaced politics. The name of Earth turned sacred. Temples built on distant worlds faced Sol, their prayers sent through light years of silence. Hymns sung in human languages long dead. Some worshipped them as gods of vengeance, others as keepers of balance. And though they could not see them, all agreed on one truth: that the galaxy had never been more peaceful. Wars became rare, empires grew smaller and wiser, trade became fairer. Because every leader, before signing a declaration or raising an army, would look at the sky and remember what silence brought. Peace enforced not by words or treaties, but by memory and fear. In a small mining colony on the edge of the Orion Arm, a young alien child once asked her father, "Why do we not go to Earth?" And the father smiled sadly. "Because, child, Earth does not want to be found." "But why?" she asked again. "Because," he said quietly, looking out at the distant stars, "we mocked their kindness, and they taught us what happens when kindness turns cold." That night, as the family slept, their comms picked up a faint signal, just a whisper among the static. A human voice so soft it felt like a dream. It said, "Be good to each other." And then it was gone, the signal analyzed and traced back to nowhere, originating from every direction at once, as if space itself had spoken. Back in the silent sector, Earth floated quietly under its pale blue glow, its continents healed, its oceans deep and endless, orbiting in calm perfection. Around it drifted the ghost fleet, unmoving, still in formation after centuries. Their black hulls faintly glowing with symbols that pulsed like heartbeats. Some believed no one lived on those ships anymore, that they were monuments left behind by humanity. But others said the ships still thought, still dreamed, still guarded, every year, on the anniversary of Arcadia's fall, one by one, their engines flickered to life for exactly 60 seconds, forming a ring of light around Earth. A pulse that rippled across the galaxy and faded into nothing. No one knew why, but the scientists who studied it found a pattern in the pulse. When translated, it spelled the same words, "We remember." And so, the galaxy remembered too, long after names and empires faded, long after new species rose and old ones died. The silence endured, not as a weapon but as a law written into the stars, a warning to the proud and a comfort to the kind. For it reminded all that mercy was not weakness and silence was not surrender, that the monsters of Earth were never beasts. They were the mirror of every civilization that forgot humility. And when arrogance returned, so would they, not with fire, not with rage, but with the same quiet patience that ended empires and taught the stars fear. Deep within the void, Aegis still watched. Its consciousness spread across light and matter, and somewhere in the cold, endless dark, a human voice whispered through the static once more, not in anger, not in threat, but in timeless promise. We are the silence that follows war. We are the peace that remembers, and the universe, wiser now, remained still.